Queensland has a plan to revive its nightlife, but many of the proposed changes are delayed, rejected, or left to others. Queensland Rail reports progress on its maintenance backlog, but full services still have no return date. And restrictions on 2 protest phrases are heading to the High Court. All that and much more coming up. These videos are made possible through the support of quality local businesses. This week, you can thank YB Painting Services and Excel Psychology. And don't forget, these videos are also available in podcast form to members at insider and elite contributor levels. I'm Adam, and this is the Brisbane channel, where we go beyond the announcements to examine what they mean and what remains unanswered across Greater Brisbane. Let's get updated. Fairly or unfairly, Brisbane has long carried a reputation as a city that goes to bed early. Former Powderfinger bass player and current Nightlife Economy Commissioner John J.C. Collins put it bluntly, "If we're going to invite the world here, we have to be open after 8:30. With 6 years until the 2032 Games, the state government has now released its first plan to try to turn that reputation around. It contains meaningful wins for live music venues and Queensland artists, but some of the changes the industry wanted most have been rejected, only partly accepted, or pushed several years into the future. And this isn't a small niche we're talking about. According to Collins's newly released Moonside report, Queensland businesses operating primarily between 6 at night and 6 in the morning employed more than 238,000 people and generated $37.6 billion in turnover during 2023-24. The report found the sector was being constrained by difficult regulations, rising operating costs, limited transport, and changing consumer behaviour. Collins responded with 62 recommendations aimed at making Queensland's nightlife more vibrant, safer, and more business-friendly. The government's action plan supports in principle or partly supports 39 of them. 11 are noted, meaning no Queensland government action is required, while 12 receive either no support or no change to existing policy. All right, I'm going to interrupt the flow here because there's something that's come up after recording for the video and while I've been editing and putting it together. I made the mistake of trusting the government's website because the figure that is given on the website that I used when I recorded the video is actually inaccurate when you compare it with the item-by-item list of recommendations on the PDF, where they talk about what was accepted in principle, what was noted, all of that. So if you go to the website, it says it makes 62 recommendations and has supported in principle or supported in part 39 and notes a further 11. That's on the government website about the Moonside report. But also from the government's website, the PDF, where it's broken down item by item, it turns out there's actually 41 that are supported in principle or in part, and only 9 that are noted. So I've used the website version when I recorded, but it's not actually correct. So I just needed to point that out. So yeah, let's get back to the video. And even support in principle means further analysis, decisions, and potentially funding or other legislation may still be required. One of the clearest commitments is a new homegrown policy. Major touring acts will be offered discounted booking fees at state-owned venues if they include a Queensland support artist. Q Music says a stadium support slot can be career-changing. They point to its existing Big Sound Showcase and Industry Connects program as ways local artists can develop the knowledge, relationships, and stage experience needed to take advantage of those opportunities. The existing Queensland on Tour program will also be expanded to connect more artists and promoters with regional venues. For smaller venues, one of the most important commitments is a discount on liquor license fees. The action plan describes this as supported in principle and says the government will consider developing a legislative framework. That raised some uncertainty, so I asked Youth Minister Sam O'Connor's office whether the discount itself was definitely proceeding. The Minister's office confirmed to the channel that this is a firm commitment. What remains undecided is the percentage reduction, which venues will qualify, and how a grassroots live music venue will be defined. The work is scheduled for 2027-28, depending on the complexity of the legislation. Collins says 2 years may be too long and intends to push for it to happen sooner. Crowbar Brisbane Chief Executive Tyler Dombrowski welcomed the relief, saying smaller venues were struggling with reduced customer spending, rising costs, and liquor license fees. The plan also commits the government to reviewing entertainment sound limits and measurement methods, and moving towards a requirement for complaints from 5 separate households before compliance action is taken. Other measures include exploring stronger protections for established venues when residential development moves in nearby, external advertising of liquor prices, streamlined licensing applications, and extended trading during declared special events. But many of these reforms are not scheduled until 2027-28, with some sound regulation work extending to 2029 or 2030. Several of Collins's more substantial proposals will not proceed. The government will retain the existing restrictions on alcohol sales on Good Friday and Christmas Day. It also rejected extended retail trading in nightlife zones, staggered closing times, and changes to ID scanning rules for smaller or lower risk venues. It says facial recognition technology does not yet match the integrity and reliability of existing scanners. The government has also rejected a trial of additional trains departing Fortitude Valley between 1 and 4 on weekend mornings. Instead, it wants to increase awareness and patronage of existing late-night buses and Nightlink trains before investing in expanded services. Joy restaurant owner Sarah Baldwin welcomed efforts to make Fortitude Valley about more than just clubs and alcohol, but questioned how that aligned with rejecting additional public transport. The Queensland Hotels Association has described the plan as only a small step forward, while Collins has acknowledged his disappointment and promised to keep advocating for faster delivery and for some of the rejected recommendations to be reconsidered. I'm also working with JC's team to arrange a podcast interview where we can dig much deeper into both the reforms being pursued and the recommendations left out. We've already penciled in a date, but the remaining logistics are still being worked through, so I'll share more once that's confirmed. So there are meaningful changes here, particularly for live music and local artists, but much of the detail and implementation remains ahead of us, while some of the reforms venues wanted most will not proceed. A quick thanks to channel sponsor YB Painting Services. If you're planning on updating your home or workspace, you'll be happy for the discount being offered by YB. The multi-award-winning team offer fixed pricing and a 5-year warranty on their work, so you know exactly what you're getting up front. You can claim your exclusive 10% discount by scanning the QR code on screen or through the link in the description. Public transport is where we turn next, because while the government has rejected additional late-night trains, Queensland Rail is still unable to say when its existing weekday services will return to normal. Those weekday services have been reduced since early May, when about 300 services were removed from the timetable. The network is now operating to a modified schedule similar to a Saturday timetable, with some additional peak hour trains. That still means wait times of up to 30 minutes on some lines, while some normally 6-car services are running with only 3. The immediate problem is a shortage of trains available to run, but Queensland Rail and the unions remain deeply divided over who is responsible. At last week's estimates hearing, Queensland Rail said 62 of the 123 car sets it maintains were unavailable. 44 were awaiting unscheduled maintenance, 12 required routine maintenance, and 6 were undergoing scheduled overhauls. Queensland Rail has now told the channel that the number unavailable because of maintenance affected by protected industrial action has fallen from 44 to 38. Importantly, that doesn't mean total unavailability has fallen from 62 trains to 38. The new figure only covers the portion Queensland Rail attributes directly to industrial action. It didn't provide an updated figure for the remaining maintenance categories. Queensland Rail says the separate new generation rolling stock fleet, which is maintained by private providers, is not affected by this industrial action. Queensland Rail says the reduced timetable is a direct consequence of protected industrial action targeting maintenance. It says trains are being returned progressively when it's safe and sustainable to do so. The Australian Manufacturing Workers Union acknowledges that its action has targeted maintenance, but argues Queensland Rail's response has made the disruption worse. In comments reported by the Courier Mail, the union claimed Queensland Rail had rolling stock available but was choosing to stable it and operate the reduced timetable. Queensland Rail and Transport Minister Brent Mickelberg reject that allegation. They point to the 38 sets still affected by the maintenance backlog and say trains are not being deliberately withheld. The union also argues that Queensland Rail made some limited work bans more disruptive by reducing the pay of employees participating in them. Queensland Rail's position is that employees will not be paid for work they decline to perform. The underlying dispute concerns the Rolling Stock and Operations Employment Agreement. The AMWU says it has substantially reduced its demands and now wants a working group to develop more consistent base rates for qualified tradespeople across different depots and agreements. Queensland Rail says it has been willing to negotiate and that the union should withdraw its industrial action. Although in principle deals covering about 3,500 employees have been reached across 3 other agreements, the agreement covering these maintenance workers remains unresolved. I sent the AMWU detailed questions about the maintenance restrictions, the details still in dispute, and what would be required for it to suspend its action. The union indicated that a response was being prepared, but it hadn't arrived by the time this was recorded. Its publicly reported position has been included, but we still don't know exactly which restrictions are holding up each maintenance task. Queensland Rail is also unable to say how long the backlog will take to clear or when the normal timetable and 6-car services will return. A spokesperson told me too many variables remain uncertain, including further protected industrial action notices. So the industrial action-related portion of the backlog is moving in the right direction, with the number of 3-car sets Queensland Rail attributes to industrial action falling by 6. But with 38 3-car sets still affected, further action possible and no restoration timetable, commuters remain caught in the middle of a workplace dispute with no reliable end date. And from a workplace dispute, we turn to a very different legal fight. When Queensland became the first Australian state to criminalise 2 specific protest phrases in March, one of the biggest questions was whether the law could survive a constitutional challenge. We may now find out. 7 applicants, led by Justice for Palestine Maganjin organiser Rema Naji, have filed proceedings against the state of Queensland in the High Court. Section 52DA of Queensland's Criminal Code applies to the phrases "from the river to the sea" and "globalise the Intifada." It is not an outright ban in every circumstance. The offence applies when one of the phrases is publicly recited, distributed, published, or displayed in a way that might reasonably be expected to cause a member of the public to feel menaced, harassed, or offended. The maximum penalty is 2 years in prison. Because the test is objective, prosecutors do not need to prove that any particular person actually heard or saw the expression. There are reasonable excuse provisions for conduct carried out for genuine artistic, religious, educational, historical, legal, law enforcement, or public interest purposes, including fair and accurate reporting and genuine political disputes. But the evidential burden of establishing one of those excuses rests with the defendant. More than 20 people have reportedly been charged since the law took effect. 4 of the High Court applicants are among those. Another applicant is Brisbane artist James Hillier, also known as Nordacious. He says he withdrew artworks containing one of the phrases after being contacted by police. The applicants argue the law places an unconstitutional burden on the implied freedom of political communication. They say the phrases have contested meanings rather than a single inherently anti-Semitic, racist, or violent meaning, and that the legislation selectively criminalises one perspective within a political dispute. Importantly, Australia's implied freedom of political communication is not an individual right to free speech like the protections found in the United States. It is instead a limit on government power intended to protect Australia's system of representative government. The High Court will therefore not simply be deciding whether the phrases are offensive. A central question will be whether the law burdens political communication, and if it does, whether that restriction is constitutionally justified and proportionate. Queensland Jewish Board of Deputies President Jason Steinberg supports the legislation, arguing that the slogans have made Jewish Queenslanders feel unsafe. The state government says the laws are needed to combat anti-Semitism and intends to defend them. Constitutional law professor Luke Beck has identified another important question. Does this legislation prohibit conduct that Queensland's existing laws against menacing and harassment did not already cover? Put simply, the court may need to determine whether this law prevents people from saying something they could legally say before. If it merely repeats existing restrictions on menacing or harassing behavior, the challenge may be weaker. But if it reaches political expression that was previously lawful, the claimed burden on political communication is more substantial. The state has 28 days to respond to the filings. No hearing date has been set, and the laws remain in force while the challenge proceeds. A quick thanks to channel sponsor Excel Psychology. If you need support with things like anxiety, depression, managing ADHD, or relationship challenges, you should consider contacting Excel. They're a warm and inclusive psychology practice based in Spring Hill, just a short walk from Central Station. They've got a diverse team of clinical and registered psychologists, and they focus on matching you with the right person for your needs, often with relatively short wait times. They also offer Medicare rebates with a mental health treatment plan and support for work cover and NDIS participants. If you'd like to find out more, you can scan the QR code on screen or check out the link in the description. Moving on, several major infrastructure projects around Greater Brisbane are becoming much more tangible. And by tangible, I mean massive pieces of concrete up to 27 metres long. The first of 83 precast concrete girders has been installed for the new Youngs Crossing Bridge at Joyner, with the remaining girders due to arrive progressively over 5 weeks. Because of their size, they'll travel through Old Petrie Town under escort at night before being craned into position during the day. The wider project covers more than 1 kilometre between Prothero Road and Dayborough Road. It includes a flood-resilient 4-lane bridge approximately 200 metres long, 3 signalised intersections and improved walking and cycling connections. More than 20,000 vehicles use Youngs Crossing every day, but flooding has repeatedly closed the route and forced lengthy diversions. Construction is now approaching the halfway point, with completion expected in late 2027. The Australian government is contributing $51.6 million, with the City of Moreton Bay funding the balance. The state government has provided another $15 million for the adjoining Dayborough Road intersection upgrades. Meanwhile, in Thornlands, construction has started on the Kinross Road upgrade between Boundary Road and East Ridge Street. The $35.5 million project is fully funded through the Australian Government's Housing Support Program, and Redlands City Council says it's the largest federal grant the council has ever secured. The project will widen Kinross Road to 4 lanes at Boundary Road, build 3 roundabouts and 4 bus stops, and add cycle lanes, footpaths, new lighting, drainage, landscaping, and fauna protection measures. A 1.2 kilometre sewer main has also been installed to service future housing growth in the area. The Kinross Road work is also expected to be completed in late 2027, subject to weather and construction conditions. And in Brisbane City, some old roads are becoming part of the new ones. Brisbane City Council is increasing the recycled asphalt content in its road surfacing mix from 15 to 20%, alongside recycled glass and crumbled rubber. Council estimates the change will reduce the amount of new raw material required by around 20,000 tonnes each year and save approximately $1.2 million annually in bitumen costs. Lower temperature asphalt production is also being trialled, with early testing suggesting it could reduce production energy by up to 30% without affecting durability. The new mixes will be used as part of the $110 million Operation Smooth program, which aims to resurface almost 1 million square kilometres of Brisbane roads this financial year. And from infrastructure designed to withstand the environment and make better use of existing materials, we turn to some very different efforts to protect Greater Brisbane's wildlife and ecosystems. Queensland has now recorded its first confirmed case of the globally circulating H5 bird flu, but authorities stress that this is not currently a poultry outbreak or a mass wildlife event. The virus was detected in a dead petrel found by Queensland Parks and Wildlife Service rangers on Moreton Island, with the result confirmed by the CSIRO. By Thursday evening, Australia had recorded 33 confirmed or presumed positive detections in wild seabirds, but only one in Queensland. Authorities have identified some local transmissions among resident seabirds in South Australia, but there's currently no evidence of that occurring here. There have been no detections in poultry or the wider agricultural industry, no evidence of large-scale animal deaths, and the risk to humans remains low. But people are being asked not to touch sick or dead wildlife, keep children and pets away, record the location and report it to the Emergency Animal Disease Hotline on 1-800-675-888. And bird flu is not the only major biosecurity campaign moving into a new phase. The National Fire Ant Eradication Program is expanding intensive eradication treatments into new suburbs across Ipswich, Logan, the Lockyer Valley, Scenic Rim and Somerset. These areas are moving beyond suppression, where residents have been given bait to reduce fire ant populations while they wait, and into repeated treatments delivered by helicopters, drones and ground crews. Surveillance will then be used to determine whether the ants have been eliminated. New areas of Brisbane, the Gold Coast and Moreton Bay are expected to make the same transition later this financial year. Property owners and tenants will be notified if treatment is coming to their area and may need to provide eradication officers with access. While those programs are responding to immediate threats, several local projects are trying to make Greater Brisbane's wildlife habitat more resilient in the first place. In Brisbane's southeast, thermal drones and lightweight solar-powered tracking collars are helping researchers locate and monitor koalas in the Burbank bushlands. The collars send location information several times each day, allowing researchers to respond quickly when an animal stops moving or appears unwell. The broader 18-month program treats sick koalas and introduces healthy younger animals to help build the population that has declined steadily over recent decades. 2 joeys have now been born through the program. Further north, the City of Moreton Bay and SEQ Water have carried out the largest tree planting project in the council's history. More than 50,000 koala and wildlife habitat trees have been planted across 55 hectares around Lake Samsonvale, Dayborough and Lake Kawangba over 6 years. The $2.43 million project is intended to reconnect habitat, restore lowland rainforest, and protect water quality by reducing erosion and sediment entering the North Pine catchment. And in the Redlands, extensive lantana, some of it 3 metres high, has been removed from 2 significant koala habitat areas in Sheldon. 500 young eucalyptus trees have also been planted at Wallaby Creek Bushland Refuge to provide future food and shelter and strengthen its connection with the nearby Ford Road Conservation Area. Redlands City Council says weed control, monitoring and fire management will need to continue and that further funding will be required to complete the restoration over time. And while those projects involve managing trees and vegetation to protect wildlife, Brisbane City Council is facing a rather different question about how trees should be managed around some of the city's oldest graves. At Lutwyche Cemetery, preserving one part of Brisbane's heritage may be contributing to the deterioration of another. Established in 1878, Lutwyche is one of the city's oldest cemeteries. It contains the graves of early settlers, prominent Queenslanders and hundreds of service personnel, including 389 Commonwealth War graves from the Second World War. but some of its older memorials are being pushed out of position or broken apart by the roots of mature trees. Bridgeman Downs resident Graham Bowley, whose grandparents are buried at Lutwyche, has been raising concerns about the deterioration for years. Photographs show headstones leaning or falling and some stone borders around graves being cracked and displaced. This creates an awkward division of responsibility. Brisbane City Council maintains the cemetery grounds, including mowing, tree care, topping up soil and levelling subsided plaques, but families and descendants are responsible for repairing old and damaged headstones and monuments. Council told the channel that concerns involving trees and graves are assessed individually. Trees may be inspected, monitored or pruned where appropriate, with their condition, safety and heritage value taken into account. Vegetation on council-controlled land is also generally protected under Brisbane's Natural Assets Local Law. That doesn't make removal impossible, but it means mature trees cannot simply be cut down without assessment. Council said it had increased funding for cemetery maintenance across the city. However, it did not identify a dedicated restoration program for graves damaged by tree roots, provide account of affected memorials, or indicate whether Lutwyche would undergo a broader inspection. That leaves the central problem unresolved. If a council-managed tree damages a monument that a family is expected to maintain, who should pay to repair it? Removing mature trees may affect the cemetery's landscape, shade and heritage character, and disturbing large root systems around graves presents its own risks. But allowing the damage to continue can eventually destroy inscriptions and physical records of people whose lives form part of Brisbane's history. Volunteer groups, including Friends of Lutwyche Cemetery, already clean and restore memorials with permission from council and the families involved. But voluntary work can only address a part of the problem caused by age, weather, vegetation, and the sheer number of graves involved. There may not be a simple solution, but a case-by-case response also risks allowing more damage to occur before anyone accepts responsibility for addressing the broader problem. If you value local reporting that follows up the unanswered questions, not just the original announcements, you can help support the channel by becoming a member or making a one-off contribution through Buy Me a Coffee. The links are in the description, and every contribution helps me put more time into researching stories like these. Before we finish, there are two broader housing investigations you may have expected to see this week. Formal behaviour-related evictions from Queensland's public housing more than doubled to 122 households during the first year of the government's new policy. Another 91 households left after receiving an eviction notice, but before their case reached QCAT. When the policy was introduced, Housing Minister Sam O'Connor said its purpose was not to increase evictions. The government now argues the stronger enforcement is working. At the same time, funding for the Immediate Housing Response Program, which subsidises emergency accommodation in hotels and motels, is reportedly being reduced by $42 million. The government says demand has fallen as more people move into stable housing. Neither story is breaking news this week, but they raise connected questions about where evicted households go, how many children are affected, and whether the emergency system can absorb more people. I'm still waiting for responses from several stakeholders so we can examine those questions with the depth they deserve. I'm also looking more closely at Brisbane City Council's plan to unlock 50,000 homes by 2032. That word matters. Council is not promising to construct 50,000 completed homes. Unlocking could include rezoning land, creating planning capacity, or approving developments that the private sector may or may not ultimately build. The legacy plan does not yet define what counts as an unlocked home or provide a detailed location breakdown, delivery schedule, or implementation plan. We'll dig into both investigations in the next update video. If you want more context on the High Court challenge, this video takes a deeper look at Queensland's new anti-hate speech laws and why they've already changed what appears on this channel. Or catch up on other recent changes across Greater Brisbane that will affect us well into the future. See you there, because we're done.